Portal spell is a little OP. You can use it for free at any time, even while running, and you can travel back to town to get full health from the potion shop. I think it should have some sort of cost. Personally, I would add a mana cost of maybe 30 to 40, and I'd force the player to stand still while they're opening the portal so that they can't use it in combat. The grab mechanic is also too strong. Permanently disabling an enemy while you beat them to death in your hands, all the while running in circles to dodge their friends, is just too reliable a strategy. It would be more fun, also, if you had a reason to throw them, instead of just killing them for free. They should probably just fall out of your grasp after 4 seconds or so. Two-handed weapons are very weak. They just don't do enough damage. They do as much damage as the average one-handed weapon, which makes no sense because you can just dual wield and deal twice as much damage. Sure, they have more reach, but having more reach isn't worth dealing half as much damage. Not to mention, most weapons that are worth using have stat bonuses, and if you have 2 weapons in your hands, you're getting stat bonuses from 2 weapons instead of just 1. There aren't enough dexterity weapons. The only weapons that don't scale with strength are daggers and bows. One could argue that this is just because the game is early on in development, but the roadmap shows that the next weapons to be added are two-handed axes, pole arms, spears, and a throwing type weapon. None of those sound very dexterity oriented. A lot of the weapons in the game would already make sense scaling with dexterity. The falchion or the gladius or the broadsword. The broadsword is actually just a rapier as far as I can tell. I think it was mistranslated. I think the best solution would be to make some of the current strength weapons into strength/dexterity weapons that just scale with whichever attribute is highest. This is a very minor thing, but if you die, the game spawns you at the end of town furthest away from the dungeon door, which is inconvenient because you have to walk across the entire town to go back into the dungeon to get your items back. I think it would make more sense to spawn the player in the graveyard halfway across the town behind the potion store. The legendary and unique drop rates feel too low, and the luck stats impact feels irrelevant. I've played on 3 characters. The first one only had 1 luck, and they saw 2 legendaries and 0 uniques after completing most of floor 2, which sounds pretty good so far, right? But I just got really lucky. My second character had 18 luck and saw 0 legendaries and 0 uniques after completing most of floor 3. My third character also has 18 luck, and they found 0 legendaries and 1 unique after completing 5 floors. So I think the drop chances should go up a bit, especially for uniques. I'm sure the luck stats impact at the very least should be a lot more powerful. 18 points is a whole lot of points. Okay, so they increase the drop chance for uniques and legendaries from enemies specifically, and they increase the effect that luck has on the drop rate of magic items, which is just the second tier rarity. There are no actual numbers shown here, but I don't think this is enough. Reason being that luck itself is still pretty much the same, and I still think it's underpowered. I've played through 2 more floors on this patch with my 18 luck character, and I still don't have a legendary. I'm on floor 8 out of 10 with an 18 luck character without a legendary. So maybe the drop rates are fine, but luck should probably be buffed. Heavy weapons just feel off. As far as I can tell, they aren't affected by gravity, they just move slower, even if they're moving downwards. Also, when I'm two-handing a weapon, the angle at which it's pointed doesn't seem to make sense based on the orientation of my hands. Maybe this is a calibration issue, but I've recalibrated a few times to fix it, and it still feels off, but maybe it's just me. So to help illustrate this, the red arrow is the position at which the sword should be angled based on my hands, and the blue arrow is where the game puts it. Since there is no fall damage, you can pull off some cool Dark Souls style plunging attacks in this game, but they don't deal any extra damage because it's not an actual mechanic. I think it would be cool if it were an actual mechanic. If the velocity at which you fell somehow added to your damage, maybe made enemies ragdoll or something. Oh. Okay, so apparently if you land directly on an enemy's head, they just get ragdolled. It doesn't do any damage, but I guess we're halfway there. Sometimes it's really easy to pick off enemies from high ground with a bow or magic because they can't do anything about it, they just walk in circles. I think the best solution to this would be to make it so that enemies could scale walls if they're aggroed to a player that is above them. This isn't a suggestion, but I wanted to briefly talk about it. The damage cooldown is a very smart mechanic, and it seems like most people hate it. And I understand why, because you feel like you should be doing damage, but you're not. The thing is that without this mechanic, the best strategy would always be to run up in people's faces and flail your arms around. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, every time you hit an enemy in the game, you deal way less damage for the next 1.5 seconds, and it continues getting reset if you keep hitting them, so you have to wait if you want the timer to completely finish. You can still deal lots of damage by hitting things rapidly, this just makes it so that it isn't always your best option. It would be really awkward if the game's whole premise was to swing your arms as fast as possible every time you're not parrying. And I feel like this is a really clever solution to that problem. Okay, that's all. Hopefully I don't sound too negative, because I think this game is very good. This is honestly some of the most fun that I've had in VR. The game has only been in early access for about a week, and there have already been quite a few patches, not just fixing bugs, but adding new content too. So I think the game's future looks bright. It'll probably be a really solid product by the time it finishes early access, which isn't to say that it's not worth playing now, but an early access game is an early access game. Also, the devs seem cool. They've been extremely responsive to suggestions, which is why I wanted to make this.